We're good to go.
Okay, let's call this to order. Let's get moving here. Reviewing the agenda. We'll do the best we can here. We have, if we get bogged down here, we're going to want to get everybody back on the road tonight as soon as possible with the weather. Roads are pretty good right now, but let's, so if we get to finish early, we're going to do it.
I just have one item to add to the agenda, to the consent agenda, and that is the ERISA, the 403B plan resolution. This is a pro forma action that the board needs to take anytime there are changes to the 403B plan. So changes were made that were not requested by us, they were made in order to conform with federal law and IRS regulations. So we'd like to just add that to the consent agenda. Okay.
So 403 plan changes.
403B resolution.
B.
Yes.
Okay. Let's start with the tobacco. Increase the access age. It was tabled from the last meeting. So the issue is back on for this meeting.
That's right. And there were some questions raised, so we thought we would invite Tina Zook from the American Heart Association to join us to talk about the coalition that has formed in order to support the bill. I believe I gave you a link to the language in your board packet. We also had some, I believe Diane Kirsten-Glitman shared some information that had another document she asked us to share.
So you got a little choppy. Did you throw it over to me?
I did throw it over to you to just.
Okay. I'll make.
Who else is supporting it at this point in time? And then if folks have questions, that'd be great.
Yeah. So I don't know how much of an overview you want or need, but stop me at any point and ask questions. I really would rather just answer any concerns or questions you have. This effort to raise the sales age from 18 to 21 for tobacco products. So it's not just cigarettes, it's e-cigarettes and Juuls, which you've heard about, in the state of Vermont. I don't know if I gave you a bill or not. There are actually two bills. The one we are supporting, we don't think the second one is horrible, but the stronger version was just introduced this week. It's S86. Senator Lyons, who chairs the Senate Health and Welfare Committee, sponsored that bill. The bills are very similar, and they basically do just what they say, raise the sales age of tobacco and tobacco products and e-cigarettes to 21. The difference being, the reason we like the Senate version is because there's no exemptions whatsoever. The House bill has a grandfathering, so it would, if you're 18 now, just like what happened with alcohol in the state of Vermont, if you're 18 now, you could be grandfathered in. And we would like to just go straight to a 21 with no gradual anything. In terms of who's supporting it, it's the Coalition for a Tobacco-Free Vermont. So the main members you would know are the American Heart Association, the American Cancer Society, the American Lung Association, the Vermont Medical Society, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Hospital Association. We have met with the other educational organizations, the Vermont Principals Association and Superintendents Association, when we met with Sue from the School Boards Association. And we're all supportive at first brush, said it sounded like a no-brainer, but wanted to bring it back to their members as well. And we just don't have answers yet. It's not because anybody thinks it's a bad idea per se. When I met with Jeff Francis, they ran out of time at their last meeting. So he's polling as he goes to members, and what he's heard so far is all positive so far. And I just haven't heard back from Jay Nichols yet as to what happened at their meeting. But I'm happy. I think Sue emailed me one of the questions that she said that you all wanted to know was how specifically might this be impacting schools, both in schools and administratively and what have you. And so I think two things that really resonated with me. I reached out. We have several principals who've actually just, who for whatever reason, we found them and they found us and who are passionate about it. One of them was Chris Olix from Stowe High School, who's been on public radio talking about it. He's going to help us at the State House about it. But he and I spoke at length about, the problem he's seen. And if you don't mind, I'll read some of it because and it's very short. I don't want to miss anything. But he said e-cigarette and vaping abuse, in particular the use of the Juul devices, has led to several disruptions to the learning environment at our school, and immense amounts of administrative and counseling department time have been spent on investigating abuses of our school's policies, researching and deploying anti-vaping curricular assistance to our students and parents, and conducting follow-up to ensure that our students are not continuing to abuse these substances and others. This is not to mention the time lost to instruction for individual students when they run into disciplinary sanctions related to these devices, and the distraction, use, and abuse caused to other students who expect and deserve their school environment to be a safe one that's substance-free. And that's what we've been hearing from not just principals, but students as well. I will say, Michael, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce his name right, Michael McRaith from Montpelier High School, similar concerns that he expressed. And also, all of the principals that we talked to are really concerned about the addiction. Now, Tobacco 21 would address tobacco products as well. I think because the e-cigarette crisis has really become so large and has exponentially grown. That's what's being talked about a lot, but we need to not forget as well that tobacco is a problem with youth as well. But all of the principals, and Chris in particular mentioned the kinds of addiction they're seeing with these e-cigarettes, especially Juuls. And please stop me if you don't know what it is, but a Juul, I wish I had one, but it looks like a flash drive. It's kind of long, and the little pod that they put on the end of it it's about the size of a flash drive. One of those pods is equal to a pack of cigarettes, so 20 cigarettes worth in that pod. And you get 2 of them for about the same price. As a pack of cigarettes, so they're basically half the price. But the nicotine is just very strong, and the kids that try them many don't even know that there's nicotine in them. For instance, Juul is the most popular of the e-cigarettes. It's hip. Everybody's doing it. There's a lot of peer pressure. It's cool. It's making smoking cool all over again. We're seeing all the problems we used to see with smoking in high schools. But they don't realize that they're going to get hooked because they don't realize there's a lot of flavors, as you probably know. There's mango, there's gummy bear, there's creme brulee, you name it. There's actually 7,000 different flavors of Juuls or e-cigarettes on the market. And so they really are geared towards kids, no matter what they say they're geared towards. And it's, it's something that's been working. And so kids try them. And, what I heard from Chris is they just can't stop, and they wish they had never, in a way that he's never seen before. They just wish they could stop, and they can't. As I mentioned when I spoke with him, and what I just read is they're looking into curriculum now to how to educate the kids in advance and the parents in advance. Dan Palmer is also one of the principals who's talked to us, and he's a middle school principal, and he's seeing in middle school students the same problems they're seeing in high school students. Now, this week, the CDC just released some new data about the use of e-cigarettes, and it has increased the smoking age or smoking rate of students across the country in ways we've never seen before, but largely from e-cigarettes. So right now, there's been a 78% increase in e-cigarette use from high school students, but more concerning, I feel, to me, is it's been a 48% increase in middle school. So it's not something we're seeing in high school, and that's why we feel Tobacco 21 is so important. One of the main reasons we're promoting this is kids who are 14, 15, 16 probably know an 18-year-old that they could bum either e-cigarettes or cigarettes off of or have them buy them for them. There are not many who know somebody who's 21 that would do that for them, so it cuts off their social sources. I think what was kind of an eye-opener to me just yesterday, I don't know if you're all familiar with these groups, but Vermont Kids Against Tobacco and Our Voices Exposed are middle and high school groups that are kind of anti-tobacco prevention groups, all youth-led. And they rallied at the State House and they talked about e-cigarettes and just how widely they're used and how easy they are to get. And Harwood, there was a group from Harwood and Peoples who talked to the Senate Health and Welfare Committee members about just how widely they've seen them. And so they talked about students vaping at the back of the bus. And it's just a vape cloud pretty much at the back of the bus, which everyone thinks it's harmless. But there were 2 girls in particular who said how they have asthma and they just can't sit at the back of the bus anymore because it impacts their health. And The amount of vaping that's going on in schools is out of control. There were 3 students, I believe, from Burlington High School who spoke to the Human Services Committee yesterday, and they said it's so bad at Burlington High School, they've taken the doors off the bathrooms so that they can prevent the kids from just going in there and vaping, and it would be harder to catch them. But it is difficult to catch the kids because, and please stop me if you're aware of all of this, with e-cigarettes, there's a vape cloud, and kids can do this thing called zeroing where they hold it. And so you don't see the smoke. It gives them a really big head rush. The teacher's writing on the chalkboard. By the time she turns around, there is no cloud. So it's very difficult to catch them. And they can charge their e-cigarettes right in their laptops, in the classroom or wherever for that matter. So it's a real concern. And there are studies and more literature out that now show that students who start with e-cigarettes transition to cigarettes. I think about a third of them. So right now we have 3,100 students in Vermont who still smoke. That's just traditional smoking. That doesn't even include the e-cigarettes, right? And so that's cause for concern right there alone. That's reason enough, we think, for a tobacco 21 legislation. But the e-cigarette crisis has really grown to a proportion that we have to do something about. The governor has not yet signed on in support, but you've probably all heard during his budget address, he is concerned as well about the amount of use of e-cigarettes by students in Vermont, young people, and has for the first time supported a tax, and it's a tax on e-cigarettes to try to raise the price to discourage youth. We think that's great, but it's not enough. We really would like to see a several-pronged approach. Pass the tax, make the price higher, but then also raise the age so the young students just can't access the devices. And it's really important because the age of initiation is so important. Most smokers, 95%, started before they're 21. So if we can bump that starting age up much higher, they won't be the hardened smokers that are addicted for life. The earlier someone starts smoking and vaping, the more addicted they become. And one of the things about e-cigarettes that we've learned as well from John Hughes, who is the former chair of the Vermont Tobacco Evaluation and Review Board, and he's a researcher at UVM on addiction, is that he calls it the blue bonnet effect. So he says his wife says everything tastes better with butter on it, and it's the same with the e-cigarettes because they affect kids' developing brains. Nicotine does rather, and it goes to your kind of pleasure senses and whatever gives you pleasure. So if you're smoking, if you're doing other drugs, it's going to make you more predisposed to addiction for all of those. So there's many reasons to support it. There's not in my eyes, there's not many at all to not support it, but it is a problem that's it definitely for sure happening in schools. As a mom, I have 3 kids. 2 are in high schools. Both of my kids, my son goes to Rice High School. They actually you may have heard this on the news, they actually had a stabbing in the bathroom with a butter knife from a deal that went bad. Somebody was black marketing jewels, and the kid stabbed his arm with a butter knife. And my daughter goes to Colchester High School, and not any scientific survey, but said, are you seeing it there? And she said, yeah, I'd say about 80% of the students do it. The comment I got from Dan Palmer from Missisquoi Middle School was that about half of his students were seeing it. So it is a real problem here in Vermont, and that seems to compare with what's happening in the rest of the country.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So
I was gonna suggest a motion. If
you're getting right on top of me. You go first.
My motion is that the VSBA supports S86.
Act 86 or the resolution that was given to us.
Is there another?
I
I
think we
think what
should
would be
support this
better, more useful, because
Okay.
you never know what the vehicle is going to be.
Right.
The vehicle supports increasing the age of tobacco access to 21.
The motion made.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Motion made and seconded to SBA support.
You all are coming through kind of choppy. I couldn't even tell what the resolution was.
To support increasing the age of access
Oh,
to.
awesome. Okay, good. I didn't know if you had with any caveats, so that's good.
Okay?
Thank you.
Discussion?
I have something.
Yes.
So I am seriously concerned. You were just saying that tobacco is, especially in these vapes, is incredibly more powerful than regular cigarettes, but yet you're going to shut people off, even if they're currently using. Your support is to not grandfather anyone in. That's concerning to me. I mean, we're talking about an addiction here, and our healthcare system stinks. And many of these kids, who knows if they even have health insurance? How do you address the issue of cutting them off so quickly?
Yeah, frankly, it is a new issue because we haven't seen this before. We have seen the Lung Association has had a cessation program for students for traditional tobacco products called Not on Tobacco, and I'm not from the Lung Association, so I apologize. I can't discuss what's in that and what it does or what have you. We'd love to make sure that there's resources for the kids. I'm not sure exactly how we treat it. Like we've heard with some of the principals, this is new to them. It's kind of new to everybody. The problem is, if we grandfather, we get pushback as well from the Grocers Association, who now can't decide if somebody 18 or the 19 or the 20. When they go to buy it, it gets confusing. They start opposing the legislation. We get all these kids who may start this year and would have 3 more years to do this. Frankly, we tried to pass this in 2017. Had the legislature passed it then, we wouldn't be seeing a lot of the problems that we're having now. We're very sensitive to addiction because I think, there are some folks who want to just kind of lay the hammer down on the kids and penalize them if they're caught with these products, because as you probably know in your schools, the existing rule is in law is you aren't allowed to have either tobacco or e-cigarettes, and they still do. So more needs to be done, but we don't want to penalize the students for having them because, like I said, these are marketed to kids with all these flavors and they get hooked. I think that we have to do something to deal with addiction, but we're really hesitant to say, okay, let's grandfather and let so many more kids become addicted versus trying to address the kids who may be already.
Okay, where we got dual participants here, from now on, everybody on the web that wants to say something needs to raise their hand and get recognized one at a time so we can make sure to get everybody in the way they want to.
Anybody on the phone?
Is there anybody on the phone that wants to get in on the discussion on this question? It's fine. Don't want to forget you folks if you need to.
I guess I would did everybody get Diane's statement? Okay, great. Diane and I had an opportunity to speak about it before, and it is directly impacting administration and healthcare in our schools, and very dramatically. And I would say that this is our responsibility, and I can sympathize with how legislation might address the addictive component, but I couldn't really find myself supporting the idea of a grandfathering where we're leaving that door open for kids just because they're already 18 to continue on and addicted, to continue on with something that we know is so bad for their futures. So I think we have a place in this conversation, and I think we have a responsibility in this conversation.
Anyone else here? Anyone else online want to get in on the conversation? If not, we'll call for the vote. All those.
Clarence,
Yeah.
I just want to make sure you can see the chat. Can you guys see the chat? Because Linda is talking on the chat.
Oh, I don't see.
Oh, right there.
You guys can't see that?
No,
No, we can see it.
Oh, I didn't go
Now we can
down.
see it.
Now we can.
Now you see it? Okay, I just wanted to make sure you saw it.
No, it was there in the corner, Redwood.
So Linda's point was we're asking schools to do this without finances to help schools. This is not a school I mean, this bill does not require or ask schools to do anything, just to be clear. This is a blanket prohibition on access to tobacco for anyone who's under the age of 21. So yes, students who are struggling with addiction will manifest itself in schools to a certain extent, but that's already happening, is what we're hearing. And I think some of the information that Tina shared suggests that more and more students are at risk of becoming addicted if they continue to have access to this. But just to be very, very clear, it does not it's not a school bill. It just affects students.
Okay, any other questions, Kim?
And I think, I guess this is a point of clarification. Separately, there's a bill to tax e-cigarettes, and perhaps the advocacy there is that portions of that flows back to support education and addiction treatment, so that their grant or however otherwise schools might apply for support in that way. But it is a separate bill, so to me, that is not a reason not to support this notion that 21, to the extent that we've got 95% of smokers having begun before 21, it is very compelling.
Tina had her hand up.
Yes.
Yes, if I can just add, you're right. Just to add some additional information, that e-cigarette tax proposal has passed the House and is in the Senate now. I think it probably will pass. And it's to tax e-cigarettes at the same rate as tobacco, but it's expected to raise $1 million. What we're trying to do and we're advocating for, and the coalition is as well, doesn't mean it will happen, but we're trying really hard. Right now, that money is just going to go in the general fund if nothing is done differently. Last year, the Tobacco Control Program got a one-time appropriation of an additional $1 million because the master settlement had a kind of a surprise payment last year. So $1 million of that went to the program, but it'll go away this year. So it kind of is perfect timing, right? That we have $1 million coming from a new e-cigarette tax, why some of that money's going away at a time we really need youth prevention. So we've been asking whenever we have a chance, sure, pass the tax, but put the money into prevention, especially youth prevention and probably media campaigns, not to get kids hooked. And again, we can't promise anything, but that's we're trying hard to get that.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, Lori Sheldon's saying.
Laurie, yes.
Oh.
Just a second.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I have the basic problem with having age limits greater than when we can have young people go into the Army and kill people. I have a basic problem with not allowing 18-year-olds to drink or smoke, but they can go out and kill somebody. I just wanted to say that.
Okay. Gio?
So I have that same concern, Lori, but I think I've wrestled with this and I think that, this is a product that is so nasty. And in my other life, I'm a farmer, and they've banned numerous substances, DDT, things like that, because the health effects are so bad. I think this falls into that category. And even though there's a civil liberties issue, this is a product that has to stop. And we got to nip it in the bud as quick as we can. So I think it overrides that civil liberties concern.
Okay, anybody else?
Let me call the question.
Call the question. All those in favor?
Call the question?
Yes.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Who's the calling?
All right, so the motion to call the question is carried. The question is, so we're going to vote on it. All right, the motion is to support raising the age for tobacco purchase and consumption from 18 to 21, the VSBA to support that provision. That's your motion, correct? All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carried, so declare it. Hard enough to keep track of the people in the room. I'm trying to.
I think there was only
Phone
one
and
nay.
the Computer and that, but I think we have everybody. So the motion's carried, and we thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you for joining us.
Oops, let me just unmute her.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Bye, Tina.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the Act 46 delay update and discussion. Nicole, kick us off on this issue.
So at the January meeting, you'll recall the chair of the House Education Committee joined us. And we had a wide-ranging discussion about the committee's priorities. And at that time, I believe the message was that the committee was not, she as chair was not inclined to have the committee take up Act 46. It was in the courts, and the inclination was to allow that process to play out. So at the time, there was no sense that the VSBA needed to weigh in on Act 46 at that. And 2 or 3 weeks ago, it was about 2 weeks ago, Representative Heidi Schurman from Stowe. I think there was some frustration that no action had been taken in that committee to even hear about a slate of bills that had been introduced related to Act 46. And so she was preparing to introduce an amendment to the Budget Adjustment Act from the floor that would have delayed Act 46 implementation for those who were under state board orders to merge until 2020. In an unusual series of events, I guess, or situation, the Speaker of the House promised Representative Schurman a vote on the floor of the House on the question of delay in exchange for her agreeing to withdraw that amendment from the Budget Adjustment Act. That placed the House Education Committee in a pretty difficult position and guaranteed that there would be a vote on the floor within a pretty specific time frame. Really gave the committee 2 days to take testimony on what the vehicle ended up being H39, had similar language to the amendment, or the same language that the Representative Schurman was going to introduce. Once I became aware that that was the agreement, and the committee was going to take testimony, I actually believe the chair of the House Education Committee at some point went with the vice chair to a meeting of superintendents. They had an all-members meeting and invited, similar to our meetings, they invited the chair. And they announced that they thought a 1-year delay was likely to happen. And a number of superintendents reacted very strongly to that. And superintendents in affected districts. And so that caused them to sort of take stock of maybe there's not universal support for the notion of a 1-year delay being a good thing. And so they decided that they needed to take some testimony before moving forward with any approach. And so I asked for a conference call with the executive committee, because I had not been given any direction on the question of delay. And it really came out of nowhere and had a very tight time frame, it seemed, where the committee was going to be looking at the issue. The conversation with the executive committee was, really me just sharing information, and I believe I said I didn't think it made sense for us to take a position on whether or not delay was a good thing or a bad thing, because I had heard from board members that delay would be problematic, and then we also have board members who think delay is needed. But I also shared with them that I had concerns that the Agency of Education seemed to be taken out of the conversation because they are a party to the lawsuit. So Donna Russo-Savage and Emily Simmons were not very engaged at that point. And I had kept conversations with Emily about, her, where she said, we're really unable to get involved in this because we're a party to this lawsuit. And so the guidance that I received from the executive committee was to ensure that the committee really understood the issues around the language, or questions about the language, or the effect of whatever language they were looking at, and that to the extent there were diverse views out there, that those ought to be conveyed to the committee. Do I have that about?
Yeah,
Right.
that's about right.
Executive committee.
The other thing that the executive committee told you, the other thing that came up in the discussion since then has been the reliance on the September minutes on the decision that was made there, and Neil made that. So if he would like to address that now.
I can't. I don't know if there was any more background, Nicole, that you wanted to.
Well, I do have a little bit more background, and we didn't talk about the September motion on the executive committee call. I don't believe.
No.
Because it was a different issue, but I was asked by the chair of the committee. What I did was send an email to all school board members in affected districts, letting them know the committee was going to be taking testimony on this. I didn't send it to everybody because I didn't feel like everybody had a dog in the fight, frankly, that it was the school board members who would be most directly affected by this discussion should know that it's happening, that there's a tight time frame, and if they want to weigh in, they should weigh in. I was copied on a number of communications, some for delay, some opposed to delay. I was requested by a couple of members to help them connect with the committee in order to testify. I did that. And I was asked by the chair to connect her with school board members from Barry, because she had heard from some folks in Barry that they were not in favor of the delay. So that was a role that I played in terms of connecting folks with the committee. They were also really clear that they weren't going to take open-ended testimony because they were on a tight time frame. They wanted to hear from 3 people who were in favor of delay, 3 people who were opposed, and then the associations and the agency. I was asked to weigh in on 2 different occasions. At one point, the first time I did indicate that I wanted to testify because I had concerns about the way H39 was drafted in terms of being very confusing, and not addressing some issues that, questions that would arise if delay occurred that were unaddressed by that language. So the first time I testified, that's what I did. I said, the bill does not say who makes decisions about whether or not to delay. It leaves unaddressed what happens if you don't have a budget in place for this year, and maybe 1 or 2 other issues. And that was it. And then the following week, the chair announced, had shared with me that there was an amendment coming that sort of tried to split the baby in terms of some folks get to delay, some folks don't get to delay. I did look at that language ahead of time, and then she asked me to testify about it. And my testimony was that it resolved the questions that I had raised, for good or for bad, the previous week. After that, there were some reports in the media that said that I was supportive of the amendment, and there were a lot of emails going around among our members that I had supported an approach when I was under directives from the board of this organization not to take a position. I did my best to respond to every communication that I received from a member, giving the background and the context. Some people responded to me, some people did not. But this situation put me in a pretty untenable position in terms of messages that I think were sent by some folks on this board about actions that had been taken prior to this discussion, potential or perceived conflict between previous motions and the guidance I received from the executive committee, and then just blatant misrepresentations of what I was saying in committee. So the House did take action on H39, an amended version of H39, which allows, which gives a delay to districts that did not have a study committee or articles of agreement that were presented to the voters, and requires districts that did go through that process to merge by 2019. And then there's some, very specific language to deal with MUDs, all of which are in different places. So that's now going to be in the Senate. And I think it's important that this group have a conversation around what's expected of me in that process, because I did not feel like there was, a lot of clarity around what the position was of this organization, if there is a position. And that made that, and some messages, frankly, going on around that I was acting as a rogue agent, which is not, that's not a good place for me to be.
No names are available.
Okay. I'm taking names.
That was the perfect timing on that. Somebody's listening.
So,
And I did copy the executive committee on many of the communications I received, so they are in the loop in terms of.
And so that's where, wonderful segue,
Yes.
because that's where I want to jump in, because some of those emails that we were copied on from Nicole had some board members, I think, questioning the position that Nicole took in reference to the motion that we passed back in September. And so I guess I'll take responsibility for that since I originated that motion. So sorry that that has been the source, I think, of some of the problems. But
what was that motion again, Neil?
So the motion as it was approved said that, and there's some fluff in the beginning. It said that the VSBA is an advocate for promoting good governance in public education, expanding student opportunities, and equity in education. And then I think the part that is really important was, because of the diversity of our membership, the VSBA will not take a position on individual district proposals on consolidation. We will, however, work directly with any district that needs assistance with governance structures, developing mechanisms for increasing student opportunities, and assisting districts in achieving equity. And then I just want to back up, because what I went back and I looked at the videotape from that September meeting, because it wasn't, I was a little cloudy, it had been a few months. And the context for that motion and that decision was different. So at that meeting, what Gio had asked for, I think on Nicole's request, was guidance from this board, because it was just on the eve of the Agency of Education and the state board releasing their merger recommendations, and we needed guidance for the ED. How are we going to respond to those things? And there was a lot of discussion.
So let me just say, I was being asked whether we were going to be taking a position on specific proposals. So that's why I asked this board to tell me in that context. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
We were being asked to weigh in.
So when I looked at the videotape from that September meeting, there were a lot of you all were all talking about your individual cases, your individual situations. And the only thing, and I remember at the time of the meeting, the only thing that I took out of all of this was that nobody is the same. Like everybody's got a different position on this. And I'm like, how the hell is the VSBA going to come up with an advocacy position that encompasses the varying feelings and beliefs about this whole Act 46 consolidation thing? I think it just wasn't possible. And so I came up on the fly with that motion language that says we can't do this, right? The individual consolidation proposals being brought forth by the districts, the individual districts, they own that, right? The VSBA can't come up with an advocacy position that supports all of this. What I worry is that the discussions that happened since then and some of the emails that I saw floating around were using that motion that actually it passed unanimously on this board, but they were using that motion to say that the VSBA or Nicole couldn't offer input or commentary on anything related to Act 46 consolidation. And that was not my intention of the motion that I brought forward to this board. I did not think that meant that the VSBA couldn't offer input on the practical implications of legislation that may be under consideration that could possibly change Act 46. So that's where I was coming from in the motion language. I feel that it's now being used in a different context. I mean, now it's being used in the context of, is a delay good or bad? And I was like, that's not what I was thinking that we were talking about and that what we agreed to as a board at the time. So I guess I can pause.
No, except for the executive committee that gave the guidance to the executive director when this first came up in between meetings. But now, at this point, with what's going on here, is what we'd like to do is it's through the House, it's over to the Senate. We're gonna get asked for an opinion or what we should do. So we're having a meeting tonight. We're gonna have everybody's input from everybody on what they think we ought to, our position ought to be, and hopefully we'll come up with something. Dan, you want to speak next?
Hey, if I might, Clarence, maybe this is a good time. I see right after dinner, we were going to take up a motion that I had started talking about in December, but we could just do this now. It seems like a logical conclusion to this discussion. I also will take responsibility. I think I'm the source of the email. I wrote to Nicole mentioning the motion, but I did not share that with anyone else other than you. So it hasn't been going around unless whatever.
Somehow the notion that the VSBA board said we're not going to take a position on anything has reached the membership.
Well,
whatever channel, and so I'm being copied on emails saying that I'm doing something that's contrary to direction given to me by the board.
Well, if this seems reasonable, I do have another motion. There's a half an hour on the agenda later. Shall we just do this now while we're here? I would ask that I have a short thing I'd like to read, and then I'll present the motion, and then we can vote on it or discuss it further.
We could. I'd like to. That may very well work, but first, because of where it's at now, it's at a different place than it was when you made the motion. We may very well come back to your suggestion. I'm not saying no, but let everybody else here that wants to weigh in on where we're at with the Senate on what the what the position of this group should be, what everyone's thoughts are, and then we'll move ahead with whatever way we go, you know. So Nicole has the guidance and the support of the board on what we would like her to do on our behalf in the next few weeks. Yeah.
Just very quickly, the motion that I'm planning to present tonight is not the same one that I passed around in December.
Okay.
So just so everybody knows, I think it
The
would be
one in
one,
the package?
no, I think it would be one that would give that direction, but nonetheless, I just wanted to say that.
Okay.
It's not the same one, so.
Yeah, let's see. You want to get something?
Yeah, so I was up in Montpelier and heard Nicole speak to the committee, and she was very clear in pointing out that this, there was issues with what they were debating. But she was also very clear saying that the VSBA has no position on this bill. But if you pass this bill as it is, there are issues. And the issues that she was pointing out weren't pertaining to delay or not delay. That's not the point of what I'm going to say next. So I just wanted to say, I was up there, I saw it. If anybody suspects she's going rogue, I think that that's a misnomer. But I'm getting to the delay, because we need to take a position on this, right? And so I'm personally coming from a district that has complied with Act 46, that went through a great deal of bloodletting in my community. I don't want to see a delay. I feel like that we've gone through the pain of complying with the law. However, having said that, I think maybe at a minimum, what we could do as a VSBA is say, because the secretary was saying this, and I'm not just doing it because the secretary was saying it, but let's take a step back. It's playing out in the courts. Let's let it play out in the courts first. Why is the legislature talking about what the courts are going to be deciding about? I also have a great concern is that the same people who are pushing for a delay have fought Act 46 from day one. So I have a concern that this is just another tactic to kick the can down the road. And it's not about like, give us time to comply with the law so much as it is, give us time to figure out how to not comply with the law in the long run. So I guess I would if it was up to me, I would say, let's not do any delays, but I can see how the organization, it's probably better for the organization to say, let's let this play out in the courts.
Okay, anyone online don't want to ignore everybody, but I'll come back to you two in just a second. Is there anyone on the phone that would like to speak to the issue?
This is Adrian. I would like to say something very quickly, and it's sort of in line with we went through one of the first mergers down at Mill River, and I know it can be done quickly, and I know a lot of districts don't want to, and none of our school districts wanted to, and I've heard conversation already of, see, we shouldn't have done this because they're going to get out of it. And I think that's just a terrible thing. And I would just say, let the law play out, let the court play out.
Okay, Adrian. Linda is what, +1?
+1 to Geo? Says Lori. Lori, do you want to add to that?
Where did Lori go?
She's on here, hold on one second.
Oh.
There you are. You're unmuted now.
I'm ready. Sorry. The law is the law is the law, and VSBA shouldn't take positions on a law that the courts haven't already addressed. I just think I'm with them. It needs to go through the courts.
Okay.
I have spent more time complying with the law than anybody I know, because I sat on a study committee for 3 years and then got to chair an AGS committee, which is part of the law. Now, the State Board of Education has not decided what's going to happen to Vernon. They haven't even told Vernon what SU they're going to be with. So we may have 2 governance changes in our district in the space of a year. And so this rush means that we're going to maybe form an SU with Vernon and a unified district and then move into a supervisory district. They've also talked about merging our 2 SUs. This means 2 governments and no town, no district voted for the merger at all. And so we're looking at potentially 2 mergers in the space of a year. And the State Board of Ed is not getting back to anybody saying, when is this going to happen? It's February. We still don't know what's going to happen to our district. So I have done everything I could do to comply with the law. I have had more forms, more surveys. And so this idea that I'm not complying with the law, I take personally. When you say that if I'm not pro-merger, I sat on the study committee, tried to work something out. I sat in an AGS committee. It is part of the law. I testified. I've done everything. We're looking at something we don't even know what our district looks like. And we have 3 months to put it together. That's a lot. That's not assuring success for our district. And that's 2,500 students. We're not that's going from 7 districts to 2 and then maybe 1 and maybe merging SUs in the space of 3 months. That's a lot. That's a big ask. And my email and my voicemail lit up first with Gio's testimony, and it was shared in our corner of Vermont that the VSBA did not take a position. And maybe that was a misstatement, but a lot of people, that was informed a lot of board discussions. So it was probably taken out of context, as you're saying, Neil, but I think, that's where policy governance doesn't work, because you don't always know the context of the policy. But that's what was told to people in Windham County at our annual meeting. And that was a really important part of the conversation. So it didn't come out of nowhere. And people were emailing me with the September minutes and saying, what is this? So it's not good for the organization when it doesn't appear clear and transparent to the organization. So I completely agree with Nicole. I'm sorry you're in this position. And I'm sorry it was coming from my district, but we've had a hard time with
Didn't just come from your district.
We're told it only comes from us.
No, we got a little love from Arlington County, we got a little love from Washington County, so.
We're not so bad.
No.
It's all over the place.
But I just think it's really important that we're clear and transparent as an organization, because that's what was told to, I was sat in the room, and I advocated for the paying of our VSBA dues on the basis of that statement that all districts were going to be supported. And judging by many constituents in Windham County, not just people in my town, people didn't feel that way. And it was not my comments. In my email, I want to be clear, those were comments that came.
What do I have?
Sorry, Linda Smith is written up there.
Oh, Linda's on the chat, okay. We'll get back to you in a second, Kim. Linda?
Just read Linda's chat.
Yeah.
I do not think we should take a position at this point. As an Act 46 member, there were many questions that were not answered, but we did what we were asked. Perhaps taking some time is not a bad thing.
Okay. Kim?
I'm confused by that, but, and I'm sorry, Linda, I'm not sure I followed that. But I guess I feel pretty strongly that while there is litigation out there, that there's less motivation for a judge to render an opinion if it looks as though the legislature is going to step in. It makes it quite murky, and I think it would probably be in the interest of all those who are involved in the litigation to get an answer. So I think that is step one. I appreciate that if that does not, and like if it lingers for a while and the Senate needs to take this up or chooses to take this up, that we would want to be able to provide some guidance. And I think the VSBA supporting all districts is in looking at how best to work within the law. I think always sort of like when we ask for the open meeting law, or there are any number of things we call for, Sue and Nicole, on that are, oh my gosh, we've got this going on, and what do we do about it? And they look at the law and they give us their best guidance. And so lots of places over the 4 years of Act 46 or longer, maybe now, I can't remember how long it's been, the VSBA helped inform the alternative structures information with the entire series of regional meetings. I mean, there are lots of places where looking to best inform what they would do next, either at the state board level or within tweaks of the law, we've tried to provide perspective on what that would mean. And even in the context of that original motion, I feel that what Nicole was trying to do was in fact that. Like if people are gonna take up, we understand that the law has been in place for a very long time with the opportunity for people to comply with some internal time limits being moved, with some information that went to the medium alternative structures and not having it not be more onerous than those who underwent a study. Lots of places where we've advocated to support boards in reasonable interpretations of the law, but it wouldn't be advisable, I don't think, at any point on any law that we take a position that the VSBA should be positioning to support any board on how they don't comply with the law as it stands. So
Okay.
that's
We had, Dan had asked that he said he had a different motion, if he could tell us what it is, but I think we got supper right now too,
Okay.
and I don't want to screw both of them up, but if we could, you have it in writing or?
I do, I have it in writing, I'll send it to Carrie and she can maybe forward it as well.
Make copies for everyone. and
You know,
forward
make
it.
copies or whatever. Should I just read it off right now? I mean, I think it's, I don't think it's in any way inflammatory. It seems to be actually what we're kind of saying here.
Why don't we,
Or you want to
Can
wait
we
till?
send it and then look at it?
everybody have a copy of it right after supper?
Okay, all right, I'll send it to Carrie.
We'll get right to that first, and
Okay.
you can give it to Carrie, and we can get it in front of everybody, so they got a chance to look at it. And then we can, it's on the agenda, but we can kind of wrap up,
That's
hopefully, this whole discussion. Yes.
Well, and just to be clear, I think, can we take a pause right now for dinner? I think we want to come back to this maybe with some guidance on this delay.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll see what he has, and we'll go from there.
It distinctly does not say that Nicole is a bad person or has done bad things in her life.
Okay.
I hope people will
I
be
just-
pleased.
I assume, is the pizza here?
Yes.
All right. Then
We'll break for dinner, folks.
Dan is passing out, how are we gonna get this to the people
I
online?
mailed it.
They-
Carrie
they
already
should have
emailed it, so
If
So you
will-
folks have received the email?
Yeah,
You
I've
got the
already
rest of
received
it.
it.
Oh, okay.
yep, all good.
A bunch more coming,
Thank
just
you,
coming
Dan.
along that direction.
Sorry, Jan.
And Clarence, I have an email from Floor, who has input on the Act 36 delay
Yes.
discussion. Okay. So just let me know when the appropriate time would be, and I can,
She's at a board meeting right now.
but she emailed me from the board meeting with input that she would like to
Okay,
have insert into the discussion.
fantastic.
Well, long as that was on the agenda first, go ahead and insert that, and then we will deal directly with this as part of the same discussion, because as Dan made the point, this stuff is all very similar.
Let's get it out
So
on the table.
let's go with flows.
Okay. So so Floor sent me an email. She unfortunately couldn't be with us tonight. She is at an Act 46 meeting. But she did send me this input for tonight's discussion. She says, the motion that we approved at our last meeting is in line with the question that we had in front of us that night. I felt that Nicole's testimony was right on the line. We asked her to walk, and she gave helpful information and represented the diverse membership. If the question is different now, and we do indeed make a different motion, then she says any decision on delay or not delay, if we need to take a position today on that question, has to take into consideration our diverse membership and our core principles, one of them being equity. Equity is in all caps. Equity is the most important, and as a member of several Act 46 committees and working on Act 46 for 3 years, I would want to feel like you are giving us a pass, or you are making special adjustments for us that others didn't have. I do not make this statement as a representation of all Washington Central I just believe that it should be fair for all. The decision is not ours, but I will like some clear instructions of what is expected of us as we move forward.
Okay. All right, Dan?
If, could I take a couple minutes and just read what I have here relative to the motion that has just been passed out?
Yeah, I mean, input for the whole discussion. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I guess I have two central reasons for making this motion. One of them has to do with what people have been saying around the table, that especially you, Nicole, would look for some guidance that would, rather than just vague recollections of a motion that was passed in September, but give you some guidance as you go forward from here. What does this board think about what VSBA should be doing? The other reason for doing it is really is perception. Whether it's fair or not, people, especially I think based on the way that you were quoted in the Digger, Nicole, came away saying, there's the VSBA again, is distinctly testifying in ways that seem advantageous to some districts and not to others. Whether that's true or not almost doesn't matter. What's important is that the way the VSBA is being perceived? And so I guess I felt like that's another point of this motion, is try to address that. So guidance, have something that could be referred to that would maybe turn the perception around as to how VSBA has been working on this in the past. Everybody may not know that Nicole was going to go, not going to be able to, but had been invited to go to the supervisory union. I don't know if every board in that union or just some of them has agreed not to withhold the payment of VSBA dues until, I don't know how they all did it. I'm not sure about that, but Nicole was going to go down, have the discussion with them, but that concerns me greatly because they aren't the only ones who might do this, and I think that VSBA could be in really tricky water if we have other districts saying, well, we're going to do that same kind of thing based on perception of what VSBA was doing. So, I would like to be able to say to those people, and I don't know when that meeting will actually happen. I'll do the best I can to be there, but I think it would be important to be able to say to them that the VSBA has something that they would point to, which states that VSBA is, at least from this moment on, going to be really scrupulous to not favor or disfavor any legislation which is advantageous to some districts or disadvantageous. In other words, neutrality would be the point here, and try to have something that would, to which you could refer, that would say, this is my guidance at this point. So just so you all know, I mean, that's those are the two things that I would like to accomplish. The most neutral and the guidance which would most clearly state that the VSBA is going to remain a completely neutral party in whether it refers to one district or a group of districts. And the reason that I brought that part out is because I feel like the amendment that was passed by the legislature clearly treats half of the unmerged districts differently than it treats the other half. And so I think that from a perception point of view, that's one we should really be careful about. So not to appear to be advocating for treating half of them differently than the other half. And so therefore I make the following motion.
All right, so you want to make this motion before the board?
I do.
Okay, is there a second to this motion?
Can you read it out loud?
The motion?
I mean, everybody has it in front of them.
Yeah, but people on
On the
the camera
camera?
can't see
Okay.
it.
I will read it.
Yeah, read it, please.
They have it.
everybody should have it on your email as well. So if you're at home on either phone or camera, you should have gotten it. States this: the VSBA will remain neutral in any upcoming statewide discussions about Act 46. Will do nothing which positively or negatively affects any district or group of districts' outcomes relative to Act 46, and will provide support to school boards being impacted by Act 46, regardless of the implementation issues they currently face. This includes districts choosing to participate in legal action against the state. And I call for a paper ballot on this motion, although that may not be easy. It seems to me a good thing to do, but people can vote without other people knowing.
It's going to be, it's going to have to be a roll call vote. I looked that up, and I don't think I brought the stuff with me tonight. I couldn't find a provision in the parliamentary rules that automatically demand that unless it's in the bylaws of the organization requiring that. So, and I did not find that in our bylaws. So that's not an issue. But first thing we need a second to this motion. Put it on the floor.
Second.
All right, the motion has been made and seconded.
Christina, thank you.
Christina.
Whenever you make the motions or seconds, please say your name.
Yeah, okay.
Somebody on.
Okay.
Sorry, Lori.
So, all right, now we're up for discussion.
So I have some questions. So, yeah. So the first one is the VSBA remain neutral. So this would, our current most resolution, that's not resolution, current mindset that we've worked on has been that the VSBA doesn't want to see any major changes to Act 46. So that would counter, in your mind, that would counter that, and we would have taken a new position so our old position was we're not taking any, we don't want to see Act 46 change substantially. So if a bill came out that would change Act 46 substantially, this would, how does this play out with that?
I would advocate for neutrality,
Okay.
Especially if it had either positive or negative effects on any one district or group.
So this would change that previous stance that we've made.
Yeah, although technically I don't see
Lori's got her hand up.
46 coming up, but.
I'm sorry, Linda has made a couple statements now.
Oh, Linda, I'm sorry. Keep going, Dan. We'll get to you, Linda.
So I got a couple more things, Clarence. I don't know if you want to go to somebody else or.
Well, you asked that question. If you have another point to make.
I got two more things that I want clarification on. So another one is do nothing which positively or negatively affects any district. So when Nicole was speaking to the legislature, she was not taking a stance on the original H39, but rather pointing out problems that if this passes, you're going to create new issues because of this. So would that, but people could interpret her actions as being against H39 if they really wanted it to pass. She was simply pointing out problems. So would this, in your mind, take away our executive director's ability to comment on legislation, saying, okay, not taking a stance on it, but saying there's some serious problems if this passes as written?
Well, I would say two things about that. Pointing out issues with it is with that, while remaining neutral, I guess I would say would be acceptable. However, advocating for the amendment, which came along the next day, would, in my opinion, would not be a neutral position. So that's two things. And the third one is looking at that particular piece of legislation. It turns out that it almost passed. 69 people voted for it. So they must not have been swayed by the issues we were pointing out. So I don't know. It's a rambling way, perhaps, of answering your question. Yes, if you have issues with a piece of legislation, as long as it neither positively nor negative, The one that I think is perceived as being more divisive is the amendment, honestly, which then says, well, half the people would get the delay, the other half would not. So that one is one I really think we should maintain neutrality on.
Okay, so just to be clear, I've heard what, and I wasn't up there when Nicole testified, but to be clear, she was very clear, I've listened to her testimony, saying that the VSBA doesn't take a stance for or against, but simply made,
Correct.
she did not endorse that and say this is the one you should vote for. So the last one I have is the last sentence, support to school boards. So I would say currently that's what the VSBA does.
Right.
So do you envision, what do you mean by support? Do you think that means that we enter into like the litigation that's being brought forward now, that we take part in that because that's what they want to do and we support them with whatever they do? What do you?
Yeah, in looking at this afterwards, I think we could agree that the VSBA already does what it does. And this was just meant, my purpose of putting that in there is just to say, we'll continue to do that. If you have relied on the VSBA for something in the past, you can still do that. But it's not to enter into litigation with them or something like that. That was definitely not the point. And maybe we'll have better recording of this discussion if this motion ever comes up again in the future, so that we don't, wonder what the point was. That's definitely my intention, is just continue to do what you do, independent of what the district is engaged with. Thank you.
Okay, Kim?
I have a few questions and concerns. First, to Gio's question, make no changes to Act 46, which has been the position of this organization and board. I thought I heard you say again that you're not anticipating changes in Act 46, and changing deadlines is changing Act 46. So am I misinterpreting your understanding of that?
Well, in which case, then I would say that I feel like the VSBA should remain neutral in that and should change any stance that it's had in the past, that there should be no changes to Act 46. I would advocate for.
That's different than this. That's different than previous positions.
Correct. Yes, I don't know where those positions came from or what the how those have been stated, but I would, if that's the case, then I would recommend if changing deadlines is considered to be a change to Act 46, which you seem to think it is.
Right? I don't seem to think it requires a change to the law.
Yeah, okay, well, in which case I think that our stance should be neutral on that. Not that we should not change Act 46, but that we should remain neutral on whether it gets changed or not.
And I guess I just will state my position on that we've spent 4 years trying to support all districts in navigating the law and understanding the law and how they can comply with the law. So that is a dramatic departure. The statement to positively and negatively affecting, especially if it positively or negatively affects districts, I would venture to say that those districts who complied and unified and maybe didn't want to would view a change to this as negatively impacting them. So a change to deadlines, a change to requiring people to comply, any of that would be viewed as negatively affecting those who have complied. They, depending on the position, they felt as they moved into it. And then like having Nicole be in the legislature and not able to inform legislation as to the impact of the law around any changes to it is not getting our money's worth out of Nicole, nor is it what we are really charging her to do as the executive director of our organization. And then finally, as a fiduciary of this organization, I could not support us taking a position on individual districts' lawsuit against the state. And that is what that last seems to be implying, that last sentence. So that is a non-starter for me.
Okay. I have a question, Dan, that just in general, any statewide discussion on 46 will do nothing as positively or negatively. Well, I'm trying to think, anything that this board ever came up with a position, and any vote we ever had to approve anything, there's probably at least one district in the state that it gets treated negatively every time we make a decision on anything. Not intentionally, but we tend to try to adopt a policy that's good for everybody, or at least the most of them. We try to consider, my reading of it, we try to take people's concerns from minorities into consideration when we make the decision. But sometimes when we have to, just like the whole Act 46 in itself was very controversial in a lot of areas, and it was. But we didn't just jump onto it. When this came out, we tried to steer it the best we could to be the best possible for everybody. Instead of the state dictating all the answers, we got to make the decision. We suggested that local boards all had input on how they do this. So I'm just looking at this. I understand what you're trying to say, but it doesn't play well practically on what's going on. We can't deal with a straight up and down yes and no. It's just not black and white. That's the problem. And what we're talking about in the earlier discussion, that now this discussion is morphed into, what do we do when the Senate comes out? Do we take any position at all, or do we just say here, the board says we can't talk about this? Is that the vote the board wants to take? Because to me, that's what this motion is saying. Yeah.
I just want to tell you that Linda's got several questions up there now.
Oh,
She's
all right.
gathering.
I'm almost done here, and then I will get to Linda's questions. Yeah, let's read Linda's first, if you would.
So Linda, yes, I believe Christina's district has joined the lawsuit and she is here tonight. Is there anybody else here that is a party?
Yes, Marlboro.
Marlboro, and so Christina and Dan are both here. And she says, our mission states we support all school boards with a collective voice, so we don't support school boards if they don't agree with us, question mark? Are there more, Carrie? I see there's
Yes.
more.
Oh,
Scroll down.
right, yeah.
Gaston says he would also like to make a comment. Okay, Gaston, can you unmute him?
I can.
Okay, Gaston, you're on.
Oh. He's self-muted.
Oh, you have to unmute yourself, Gaston. Or you can type in your
There he goes.
comment.
Uh-huh.
So for me, what I'm hearing is that for those schools who went, or districts who went the preferred route, they complied with the law, and those school districts who submitted an alternative governance did not, right? And to me, I think the concern is that while the preferred districts were treated one way, the alternate governance districts had to go through this whole process, and they were not identified or notified, I believe, until the end of November to consolidate. And so then the issue for me becomes, if the AOE was not prepared in whatever way to make this happen quickly, then this is not a reflection of the school district so much as, a combination of things that needed to come together to make these consolidations quicker. And so, to me, I just think we need to be very careful about, those folks who did this, good for you, complying with the law, and just everybody else, well, you're not. And you can well appreciate the issues that are some of these towns have faced because voters have said no, and so now they have to go back. And I mean, there's a whole bunch of issues here. And so it just seems that just to say, well, we're not going to take a stand, I'm not sure. I think that it was very clear that VSBA supported the, consolidation. That's fine. But at this point in time, if things are not, I'll just say, in place for this to happen, then I think we need to support, moving this 1 year so that they can get their act together. I don't know if that makes sense.
Okay. Is there anybody else on the phone that I'm missing? Yeah, Nicole had wanted to.
Well, I just,
say a
or
couple
whatever, the language of this motion would cause me to avoid committees altogether that are talking about this. I don't, because there is no action that can be taken that will not, to your point, positively or negatively affect somebody. And so that even by sitting in the room and being silent, you could argue that we somehow gave the green light to do something that's going to be viewed as harmful. So the language as it's written, I think, takes us out of the conversation, unless it's clarified. And Clarence's comments caused me to remember this resolution that was approved in 2000. Well, sort of how did we find ourselves in this conversation to begin with, given the fact that our members are divided on the question of consolidation. And in 2014, in a close vote at an annual meeting, the members eliminated a resolution that was opposed to mandatory consolidation and replaced it with one that says a few things that I look to from time to time in this, as we're navigating this.
When you say a close vote, it has to pass with a 60% margin.
60%, but it's close on that margin.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And I'm just going to read it and let you know how I've interpreted it over the last couple of years. The VSBA supports initiatives that are designed to create greater equity and high-quality learning opportunities and to achieve cost effectiveness. Such initiatives shall focus on the needs of students and taxpayers of the state of Vermont. Any initiative, and these next two sentences I think are relevant here, any initiative that impacts our governance structure or funding system must be designed in a way that reflects our community values. School boards are in the best position to inform this process and must be fully engaged in this effort. The VSBA will work with the General Assembly and our members to support initiatives at the state, regional, and local level that will address our challenges while maintaining and strengthening local communities. That was widely interpreted at the time by the board at the time as not just authorizing the VSBA to engage with the General Assembly around Act 46, what became Act 46, but requiring the VSBA to be at the table. Because the debate at the time was, we can just say, we're sitting it out. The belief, and I believe it's reflected here, although as with any resolution or motion, one can read into it what they want to take from it. At the time, it was that we need to be at the table for the conversation. So I just want you to be, that's another piece of the background. And the way I read this motion, I would not even want to be in a committee room. Because the role that we play in the building is irrespective of whether or not we support a bill. So mandatory lead testing, for example, we're gonna hopefully talk about that at some point. We've got concerns with the approach that's being taken. We don't think the levels aren't great. I mean, there's a lot we don't like about it, but we're at the table, we're in the room trying to make it as good as we can possibly make it, as clear as we can possibly make it. Once a committee has set a course and said, we're going here, it doesn't serve us well to say, well, because we don't like the bill, we're not going to help you get it to a better place. That's what I thought our role has been. I think if we start to take this approach, that's a very different approach. And you just need to be aware of, I think there's a lot of appreciation in the building for the difficult place we're in this conversation. So I don't want to say to you, like, if we're not in this conversation, we're never going to be asked to test it. That would be an overstatement. But I am concerned about what this means for future issues if we don't have agreement among the membership. We have clear processes as an organization to take positions. Those are really important so that we can take positions. If we are unable to take positions, I think we lose, I don't know, that has other consequences. So I won't say anything.
Yes. And
Let's see, a couple of things. Nicole, I think, yes, VSBA has been intimately involved with Act 46 right from the very beginning, but we're looking at the end of it now. And I guess I would say, honestly, if you weren't in that committee room, that would be almost the point of my motion.
Right.
And I don't mean to take your effectiveness away from anything else, but this is only going to be a couple more things that ever come up on this. Senate's going to pick up something and it's going to do whatever. And I think VSBA, the perception certainly would be better if honestly, if you weren't in that room there, and that would just be relative to the final implementation of the last little bits of what's going on here. It's difficult for people who don't live in the region, maybe, or other districts are the same, but it is really tearing communities apart down in southern Vermont, and I honestly think that something should be done about that. And I wanted to say, relative to what you were saying, Kim, about that last sentence, I would be happy to strike that. I mean, I don't mean to in any way imply that VSBA should be in any way participating in the legal action. So if that last sentence could easily disappear from the motion, I would be happy to see that go. So there were a couple of things.
okay, any other discussion?
So,
Jim?
Lori,
yeah, Jim Solkiver. It's just a quick, we've talking a lot about the beginning, the remaining neutral. But when it comes to, one of the concerns I have as well is just on the idea of, provide support to school boards with respect to Act 46. And, while, I think it's already been pointed out that the VSBA provides support to school boards overall, it's a very difficult balancing act to figure out what is support and what is not support. And if you define, let's just take an example of, this is specific to Act 46, and if VSBA was asked to provide support to two different districts with diametrically opposed positions on Act 46, what kind of support can they provide them while remaining neutral?
Say it's in the written.
Okay,
I think it's a difficult issue. I think the support, I get a little bit concerned about, if we say that we'll provide support in Act 46, then we're going to have people, having very different expectations. You said you were going to provide support, I need support, and this is what I want. That's going to put VSBA in a tough position of, exactly what can be provided while remaining neutral and not being, not hurting each side's position by helping, both sides.
okay. Yeah, all right. So, we have, is there any more comments on this motion? Yeah,
So, I would hate to see us bind our hands. And I say us, I don't say Nicole, because it's us binding our hands in this. I think that I've been up in Montpelier enough, and I've seen how legislation gets introduced and how it gets talked about, and there's some crazy stuff that comes to the floor, just like that. And without a voice of reason there, somebody saying it could be a neutrality bill, not a neutrality bill, a delay bill that actually says a blanket delay, but it's got some weird language in it that nobody thought about. And it's great to have one of the brightest minds in the state, quite frankly, in education, Nicole, up there saying, whoa, think about this. She's not saying she's against it. She says, think about this. Look at the ramifications of that statement. We're effectively tying our hands, and then we're at the mercy of whatever, quite frankly, crap that they can put on the floor. And we can't do a thing about it. So I think that's a real problem. And to me, this is, I look at this as a community that did, we had a lot of bloodletting. You talk about tearing communities apart, Dan. You and I can have a long talk about this because I went through it. My community was torn apart, and at the end of the day, we came up with a merger. And to delay this further would, to me, be detrimental, and that's what we're talking about, is basically getting out of the whole delay argument whatsoever. And I would take that as a slap. And it could jeopardize, because we'll have a percentage of people in our community who say, wait, they get a delay. We don't want to comply with it. Let's get a delay too. And we'll go backwards in the process. So I don't think this is the motion that we're looking for at this point in time.
so we have the motion. There's been a lot of this. Neil, you had your hand. I think Lori was were you trying to get in?
We got it, we answered the
She was just
question.
looking for what I.
Okay, all right.
The thing is, excuse me, I couldn't find it. Just in general, I thought I heard what Nicole say was essentially what I expect of the VSBA. And would it be beneficial to the VSBA to reproduce that in a way that helps promote what Dan's trying to say, which is we're not on anybody's side here. We're doing the best we can under the circumstances, blah, 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 blah. I mean, that resolution, it seemed to me, spoke very clearly and gave us guidance, and also gives Nicole the guidance. And I wondered if it could be used in some way to get Dan where he wants to be.
Lori, which resolution? What Nicole read, okay.
Okay. So Neil had his, yeah.
So this is coming from a guy who does not have a horse in this race at all. I come from a district, we were an interstate school district, we did not have to do any of this. That being said, we did some of it. So early on, I reached out to our neighbors in the neighboring towns because I was concerned that something may happen in our neighborhood that wouldn't be good for us, even if we didn't have to participate. So we proactively reached out, had some conversations. They didn't lead anywhere. All right. Personally, it doesn't matter to me what happens. It doesn't matter to me whether you guys get an extension. It doesn't matter to me whether you don't get an extension. What matters to me, though, is what we decide in this room tonight and how it affects this board's operation, right? I look at your proposal on the table. I don't want to downplay the issues that you're going through in your districts because I do believe that they are very real. But I also don't want to think that by pulling the VSBA out of the equation is going to solve those problems that you've got right now. I don't think that this is the silver bullet that makes everything better for you. I think in all likelihood what might happen is that a discussion happens in the State House that we are not around for. And the thing that you think that you're solving ends up being 10 times worse for you guys. And I also think that this sets an ugly precedent for how this organization operates, to not be involved in the decision-making process. You may disagree on the positions that the organization takes as the result of either this board making a decision or the resolution process, but that's how it works, right? And I appreciate the stuff that you've brought to the table, to the discussion, because I think it's really important for all of us to hear, but I am deeply worried about the implications that it has about the effectiveness of this organization going forward if we were to adopt essentially a position that says we are going to be out of the discussion completely. That's my, so unfortunately, I can't support this as it is right now.
Okay. Any other points or questions of discussion? Yes, Kim?
Can I ask, would it be possible for us to consider, and I respect your decision on this, but pulling the motion, I don't even know what the rules are on it, but pulling the motion back and providing some structure around sort of an if-then statements. Okay, the first position is legislature shouldn't do anything because it's a litigation, it's an ongoing litigation. If Senate decides they're going to take it up, then this is the guidance we want Nicole to follow. If it goes to the floor, this is, and it, I can't support the idea that we can't have anticipation of impact of what's being suggested, be informed by the knowledge of literally all boards in the state. So in not doing that, we are essentially not representing all boards in the state in exchange for saying nothing for the boards that are in litigation. And so I don't know if that is something that you can feel comfortable with. I don't know what the Roberts rules are on it, but I feel like there are productive things we could do that aren't counter to the resolution that we have, but provide more guidance.
There's a couple of ways to handle it.
And I don't even know, I appreciate that's your call to make.
We have a motion to adopt this, and it's been made and seconded in the discussion. I'm telling by the discussion, well, I'm not going to presuppose the outcome, but I would think probably we're going to be up for some of those suggestions that you just talked about in a few minutes. That might happen. I think the discussion's been good around getting all our points out on what we all want to accomplish. But I think at this point, we probably, motion's made second, once it's seconded, it belongs to the chair. It's my motion, it's not your folks' motion. So we're going to vote on this. If it gets voted up or down, then we'll go from there. You can't, after you make it, you can't, when it's my motion, you can't make changes on the fly. So unless you're making an amendment to that effect, we can't take that sentence out. So that sentence stays in that you said you were willing to remove, but
it's in there.
It's in there. So we're going to call the vote on the motion as proposed. All those in favor of it as proposed.
You can do a roll call, is that correct?
Yeah, I will.
I mean, it doesn't matter to me, but I want to let people.
We'll be doing the roll call of the people that are electronically, and everybody else will take care of by hands right here. Okay.
I'm happy to call a question, but I had my hand up when Neil had his hand up, so
I'm sorry.
To respond. That was a little bit to that. It's just I want to be clear that I am taking no position actually because I have a very diverse membership in Windham County, and so I am taking no position on delay as a VSBA representative. So I'm not, and when I'm talking about a delay, I think I spoke to Neil, like, I don't know if a delay is good or not, I don't know, but I'm hearing from a lot of people like, why not? And bringing a lot more of my constituency is for it. So I don't think a delay is going to resolve the problems in Windham County or Washington County or anywhere, I want to be clear. But I think it's hurting the organization when it's being said that the VSBA supports all school boards and school boards don't feel supported. So I think we need to make that clear. It's not been a fun couple months for me as a new VSBA member. I mean, the fact that I'm still here is just my grit, my sisu, my, I love pain after 4 years of being on
We
Act 26
appreciate you
committees.
being here.
Yes, maybe I'll be the next president. But after 4 years of Act 46, I'm used to the pain, but I'm trying to make it clear to the people that call me what the position is, and when they send up a resolution that says something, that when I read it out of context and not in the meeting, we have to be careful about that as an organization, how that flies and how people feel that their dues are supporting something that is not supporting them. So that is my motion behind the motion. That is my emotion behind the motion that I want to be clear about. It's not about the delay for me.
Who's online now?
Lori Chalmers, Sarah hand up.
Lori?
Go ahead, Lori.
So I'm concerned that the language as written is really difficult for me to support, but I think I understand there's an intent behind it that if we're not careful, we'll miss. But I don't know how to address it.
Okay, well, I think it's come out in some of the discussion that there's a lot of different areas and avenues that play into this. So we have to deal with this motion one way or the other, so we're going to deal with it. We'll start with it will be a roll call for those people on electronically. On the telephone, we have Jim and just Jim and Adrian. How do you vote on this motion? Yay or nay?
Nay.
Nay for Jim. Adrian, you still on? No, Adrian. All right. Lori?
I'm a nay.
Okay.
Yes. Guess I'm like gonna vote now.
Yeah, this is Bassett, I'm voting nay.
Nay. Linda?
I have to abstain.
Linda's
Linda's
abstaining.
abstaining.
Jean Marie? Nay. Can you say that again? Jean Marie, we did not catch your vote.
She's muting herself, I think.
Jean Marie, I think you muted yourself.
Oops.
Don't. She's offline, it says.
Yeah. Sounded like she said nay to me, but.
I heard nay as well.
So did I.
Dan?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Nay.
The nays have it.
Thank you all very much. Thank you. Good discussion.
All right.
Just say a couple words of a support question. I have language that I use in my testimony that may be helpful for you guys who feel like it's difficult to convey how we take a position but also represent, serve as the collective voice. So I'm happy to share that because I do think we support you. First of all, we do a lot. That's got nothing to do with the legislature. Nothing to do with the legislature. So that is clear. There are times when we have to take a position and serve as the collective voice, as Linda said. In order to do that, we have processes, and it's a democratic process. But I'll give you that language so you have that to draw.
Okay, so you have, that's the comment you wanted to make?
That's just a comment, because just because there's a follow-up to I think what both Dan and Christine were saying.
In the interest of time, Nicole needs guidance on the delay thing, so I would like to make a motion.
Please.
That I think the VSBA should wait, not take a stance on delay until the litigation has passed. If litigation, if the legislature starts discussing it in the Senate and we are forced to do something and look at some kind of legislation, I think that what we should look at is we don't want any substantial change to the rules. And other things like deadlines, that deadlines have always been set by the legislature for Act 46. They should continue to be set by the legislature. And any delay legislation needs to be clear and not create more chaos. So that's a
So you-
long-winded
It's a
motion.
long-
So
You made 3 points.
three main points. Wait
Wait,
Till
if
the,
this,
till the courts have a chance.
till
Courts have a
let the
chance.
courts weigh in.
2 is the Senate. If the Senate
If-
forces the issue and brings it up,
Then we continue with our position, which is no substantial changes.
to
Which-
46.
An example of one would be like kicking, if they had delay legislation, let the Senate and the legislature should make that decision, not let local boards make it, because we didn't get to make, that's an equity issue, because we never got to make our deadline decisions. And then any delay legislation needs to be clear and not create more chaos. That gives Nicole a chance to read in and say, this language, it doesn't make any sense like this. If you make it like this, it makes sense.
Okay. So those are the 3 points that you're making. Does anyone, yes?
So just wondering about the Senate, you say if forced into it, so.
So if the Senate takes it up, say, next week, and there's no, the litigation hasn't been settled, say.
Right, then what do we do?
So then we look at all legislation with basically two lenses. We don't want any significant rule changes, Act 46. And any delay legislation needs to be clear and not create more chaos. So I'm not taking a stance we're not taking a stance for or against delay legislation. We're just saying it needs to be clear if it comes up, and we don't want any substantial rule changes.
But a substantial rule change would be adding a delay, right? That's the way you interpret it, Kim. So that's a substantial rule change. We either have to say it has to be clear, or.
Well, I think,
Well, first thing we need to do is get these, we need a second to this motion.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, was that a motion or discussion?
No, it's a motion.
That was a motion.
Are we gonna be in the position that we're gonna have to, again, indulge me on not being sure about the Roberts rules? So that motion, if we decide we wanna change it, and it's been seconded, we can't do that.
No,
I'm just looking for
you
efficiency at
can
this
make an
point.
amendment to it.
Okay,
That needs to get voted on.
okay, I can second that then. Sorry, I just.
Did someone second it?
Looking to be efficient.
I Kim
You
seconded
did,
Yeah.
Kim second, fine. All right, now it's up for discussion. Now, you had a further
Did
question.
anyone actually get the motion? I heard the 3 points, but did we get a motion clearly?
Bill made the motion, he said it was rambling and it covers these 3 points and he stated it.
Sue has.
Okay.
I'll just read what I have.
Yes, please do.
Motion that the VSBA should wait and not take a stance on delay until litigation is passed. If the legislature starts discussing in the Senate, we should not want any change to the rules. Deadlines should continue to be set by the legislature, and any delay legislation needs to be clear and not create more chaos.
Can I just, do you want the VSBA not to do anything, or you want the General Assembly not to do anything until the court weighs in?
General Assembly.
Yeah, I would go with that was the point that I was gonna make, because I think what we wanna say is the VSBA's position is that the legislature should not enact any change to this while it's under current litigation.
So is that an amendment you want to make to my motion?
That is an amendment. I would-
Okay, but that's a different, so
Sorry, still different?
while it's under litigation, could be 2 years, could be, so I think the big question is the court gonna issue a stay or an injunction? If the court does, this question is moot. If the court doesn't, then the question of whether to delay will be back in the legislature's court. So I think what I think you want to say, why it's useful to have somebody that
How come I feel like I'm
understands
talking my way
how
through
this
it now?
works, what I think you want to
I'm not an
say
attorney, but I play one on TV.
that the General Assembly should not take action to delay until the court has ruled on a stay. Otherwise, or what you're saying is, I guess it's not, it doesn't, that the court case is gonna play out in its entirety and the General Assembly should not do anything, which, I don't know. I don't know what you want to say, but the way the discussion has been framed in the General Assembly is we need to wait and see what the court does after the hearing this Friday on the question of a stay.
And that's the question before the court on Friday.
That's one of the questions before the court. There's a motion.
Is that the only one?
Well,
Okay.
it all could happen at once.
Okay, but that's the one that's most critical to whether or not this issue will be taken up or could or should be taken up by the legislature. Okay, I just wanted to make sure there weren't others.
So yes.
So I like that,
I think that's.
but I think I also want to hear then how that dovetails with the second piece, because the second piece of this, I thought, addressed the issue of what if the Senate decides to talk about this even without number one happening?
They take it.
How do we word that one to provide proper guidance?
This is the position that the agency has been taking to date, which has been, we don't think you need to do anything until the court rules on this question, which is expected in the next week or two. At that point, then we may want to talk about certain, options. But until we get to that point, we shouldn't. At that point, the House Ed Committee said, well, we don't have, this is going to a vote in 2 days, so we have to do something. So if some similar dynamic emerges in the Senate where they say, that may be fine that the court's going to rule, but we're feeling the need to act before that, then I think what Gio said is
Right.
similar to what I tried to convey, which is that certain language, nothing is ever simple, and there are ramifications. And so the clearer that they can be, the better about what it is they are hoping to accomplish and how all the little one-offs that are occurring are going to be dealt with. Because the minute you start to say it's just this simple, the minute I start to hear, well, what about this, and what about this, and what about this, and what about this?
Yeah, it was meant to take a position of weight, and then, but if the Senate takes it up,
Waiting is not an option.
we can't wait. So now here is the two things that we'll operate under, which is no substantial changes. And Dan, that's always been our stance, but we did actually as a group support Act 49, which did delay the bill. So at the time we felt like that wasn't a substantial change. So I don't know if that's terribly far removed. I personally, this is a compromised position for me I'm putting out there, because I would just say no. But I don't think that's in the best interest of the organization either. So yeah, so I in that statement you made earlier, I could not repeat it, but I agree with it. That's what I would have said if I was smart.
So what Neil would like to do is to change your motion to say that if the court doesn't give a stay and the Senate picks it up, we're going to deal with it. We're going to deal with it as best we can in the Senate. We aren't going to wait for the whole court case to play out 2 years down the road. That's basically what you're recommending, right?
Yeah, I think so.
You have language?
Can I?
Yeah, I'm trying to get it down.
Can I just ask, I don't know, and I think something could come out of the Senate that then, do we want to not limit it to Senate and just say the legislature?
I think so. Yeah.
Maybe that would be a good idea, because it could get kicked back to the House
Okay.
in a conference, so. Instead of Senate, we know it's the Senate where it'll probably be first, but it could very well be involved the legislature. So if you substitute that legislature for Senate, that's a simple substitution that doesn't change anything.
So could I just ask for clarification? I'm trying to write this down.
Absolutely.
Are you only talking about if the court doesn't give a stay, then this is what, or because it could come up in the legislature in other scenarios?
Correct me if I'm wrong. If the court issues a stay, then nobody can do anything about it anyways, right? The legislature can't pass new law over the court's action, can they?
Right, it's all delayed anyway.
Once a stay has been granted.
Well,
Right.
They can grant a stay and then issue a decision on the case in May,
right.
and then it's done. And then the law is still implementation July 1, unless the General Assembly.
Good luck with that.
Yeah,
Good luck with your tax bill when we sort out the mess from that.
Could I make a recommendation that we just strike the qualifying criteria for the second phase of this and just say, if this is taken up by the legislature, notwithstanding whatever happens at the court level, we will be, I don't know what the language was that you had there for our position in that scenario.
Our position in that scenario was that we don't want any significant rule changes. And I gave an example of one of like changing the deadlines, not allowing local districts to decide their own deadlines, but having the legislature do it, because it's an equity issue. That's what they did with us. And then any delay legislation needs to be clear and not create more chaos.
Okay.
In other words, that gives Nicole a chance to read into the language and say, that language makes no sense. I don't know what you're trying to say. Let's clarify that.
I'm confused. I just need to say I'm confused. So is it that, I'm sorry, Clarence.
No,
I just need to be clear.
This is
What I
not
do,
simple.
what do you mean? So is the first position that this question or the final phase of Act 46 ought to be played out through the courts?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying we should, we should take a position that we allow the legislature to wait for the courts to weigh in on this. If the legislature doesn't wait, then we have those other two positions I just outlined. Does that make sense? How's that?
Yeah, I think
I'm
so.
getting language from you that doesn't.
Yeah, no,
I also want to give you a directive that you can follow.
right, right. I mean, there's different narratives that get thrown around about the court.
It depends on
So I'm open to different language. I'm not married to what I'm.
You kind of are, because I married
Okay, well,
Is it?
Dan?
I guess I see a duality between your two criteria if the legislature takes it up. No major changes to the law, but any changes to the law have to be clear as to how they, and treat people equitably. So which one is it? Because if there are no major changes to the law, then they can't add on any time.
no, it's just sometimes the language of the bills themselves are not, it's not good language. It's literally like the verbiage of it.
So do we
And
need,
it causes, it doesn't mean it's a substantial change just because you clean up language. Yeah.
Well,
does anybody see that, else see that as a duality?
I see where you're coming from, Dan.
Yeah.
You're saying, we don't want the law changed,
But if you do change it, it's
but
gotta
if
be.
you do change it,
Yeah.
you gotta make sure it's
No
clear.
substantial changes. No
well, right, so
substantial.
then what is substantial?
Oh, yeah.
Kim
Yeah.
thinks extending it by a year is a substantial change. You may think
But
it's not a
that's
substantial.
just what we've always been as an organization. We can only, that's when it comes down to a change. That's when we meet again in March and they're talking about this change. And that's when we decide if that's a substantial change or not a substantial change. I mean, at some point, we can't foresee everything that they're gonna put down. Is like so at some point as an organization, we just have to use a word and then we interpret what that word means later on.
No, you're asking me to interpret what that
So
word
that's-
means in the line of fire.
Yeah, okay. So what's better?
Would you remove the section about no major changes and just say, if the legislature does take it up, everything that comes out has to be clear, concise, and equitable? That's a bigger concession on your part, I recognize that, Gio, but I think it's one that.
I think equitable is also a problematic.
Okay, don't even put that in there.
Because that's all in the, I mean, it's not gonna feel equitable to people. I mean,
Right, yeah.
You know, it just feels like we're getting to the end of this where it's exceptionally hard, and the beginning wasn't that easy, in all honesty. Like, you know, from doing your study committee, like, the analysis, so I think to Gaston's idea that if you comply with the recommended structure, you just do it and it's done. We spent 18 months studying, analyzing, looking at numbers in all of our communities, looking at student outcomes, looking at opportunities, looking at finances. We did all the things that the alternative structures needed to do to comply with that part of the law. And I think every study committee that was doing their job did that. And so no part of this was easy. So now we're at the part that's both not easy and politically untenable for a lot of people sitting in the legislature who made the law. And it feels political that they made the law and aren't willing to go through with seeing it through, and notwithstanding outstanding litigation, which I think should be weighed in on. But if the legislature delves into it, the judge isn't going to feel compelled to give people resolute answers in a short order. They're going to be like, okay, well, now it's being messed around with. Maybe the decision changes based on what happens. And I don't think that is better for anybody. So I just find it frustrating. And I also know we have already seen the politics play out in getting a vote on something that the leadership made a deal on. So we have to provide guidance that doesn't have Nicole in the line of fire, that is in line with our resolutions. And I think while, let's take, for example, the Conlon thing, there are people who are going to feel like they're winners or losers based on this, but there should be some objective criterion. If the answer can't be that the legislature advocates their responsibility to follow through on a law they created by handing it back to the very communities who have been doing battle about whether or not they want to unify. The notion to imagine that those communities can decide what their data is going to be is that's just not fair to anybody in those communities, or most importantly to the kids. Like, that's, I think, what's getting compromised, because there's so many laws coming down, like the STED laws and the funding laws and the new finance systems, and like all of these things are happening, and so much energy is being sucked by not moving forward that I worry just in general, because I know how much energy it takes to move forward, and it's a lot of work. So I guess I just would say that at some point, letting the legislators off the hook to not say who has to comply at what deadline doesn't feel right. It feels completely political, and I would have a hard time feeling like that leaves clarity. And
Okay, we're gonna.
I don't know how we say it. I don't even know if that feels right to you guys.
Read back what we have for a motion so far, so we can see just where we're at here.
Okay, so I changed VSBA to General Assembly. So General Assembly should not take action on Act 46 deadline delay until court has ruled on stay. If this is taken up by the legislature, VSBA's position is that there should not be significant rule changes, and any delay legislation needs to be clear and not create more chaos.
Does that sound like a reasonable motion? A reasonable rendition of what we've discussed?
So the question I always have for my administrators is, can that work for you? Does that work for you? Because if it doesn't work for you, then I don't want that. I mean, if it works for me, that's one thing, but you have to understand what that means, and it has to, you want guidance on this. Does it give you the guidance that you're asking for?
Where I got thrown was assertions in the room that a delay equals substantial change.
Right.
Because that is in effect the board taking a position on that question, I think. But I don't know that that's a universal sentiment. And so what I'm trying to, recognizing that everybody's in the room, you know, so if there's not at least common understanding among the people who are at this meeting tonight about what we said and what we mean by what we said, then that motion is not helpful to me.
So, in speaking of, is a delay a substantial change?
Correct.
And I would, having been the one who made the motion, I would say it's not a substantial change. Because otherwise I wouldn't have made that motion.
You would have just said no delay.
No delay. Which is what I want to say, but I.
Okay, can I just ask a question before, because it says significant rule change and everybody keeps saying substantial, so do you want to change it to substantial or does it matter?
Again, I would look to you to say, does that matter?
So I think the phrase that has been used in the past is don't change the rules of the game.
Okay. So you want to keep it at those?
So I think that.
I believe what we used when we did the Act 49 said that any changes to the law should not fundamentally change the rules. I think that's the language that we used in Act 49.
In our support for Act 49.
Yes.
And I'm fine with that same verbiage.
So should I change it at all?
Yes, so long as people in this room and on the phone and on the agree that a one-year extension, whether it's for everyone or certain, that's not a substantial change in the rules.
Are we in agreement with that point?
Because if not, then you ought to just have a motion and a vote on whether you support delay. And that'd be a heck of a lot clearer.
If we have an understanding about this, then you're good with it?
Yes.
So I just want, I thought the clarifying point was that the substantial change would be if districts decided, what I thought I heard from Kim and was that, Gio, was that it would be sending it back to the districts to determine the time change versus a time change.
Yeah.
So that's pretty clear.
Mm-hmm.
The VSBA does not support sending deadline changes down to districts. Does not believe it's beneficial for all districts to have districts decided. I can see that that really works for our position, and that any delayed changes are made at the legislative level, and that is not a significant change. I think that was where the divide was.
And in the end of the day, we might consider it to be a change because we were all playing by a certain set of rules for the last 4 years, and that is a change. I would not object to. The legislature made the law. If the legislature is going to change the law, they need to be very specific about for whom they will do that. And I would support them being not arbitrary and capricious, but rather mindful of how they determine who must comply by a certain date and who wouldn't. So if the field or those who are concerned or in litigation or otherwise are going to say nobody should have to, if, like, for example, Conlin or whatever other version of an amendment comes out, if that will be unacceptable and Nicole will be taking it because of it, then I wouldn't support that that is the condition, that Nicole doesn't hear from people if there's a change to the law that has the legislature making decisions about who must comply. If in the end of the day, the legislature says, none of them have to, then that's fine. But I don't think I would necessarily advocate for that when there are administrations and board members and communities that have been well underway in getting there, unifying their SUs and getting to the work of the unified district. It would really be, I think the legislature and the committees heard from those communities saying, don't delay us. We need to go and move forward and do other work.
Okay.
So, I am okay with there being a change as long as the legislature doesn't abdicate its responsibility back to the communities. And I would phrase it like that versus the VSBA doesn't support local communities in their self-determination on that matter. I think that would not be a language we would want. I didn't say you were saying
I'm
that.
not saying that.
No, I know, and I know that.
I'm doing this, and I'm not saying that.
No, I mean, like, I wouldn't want, like, us in this room, we understand that, but it is sort of the thing that a lot of people say, that VSBA doesn't support local communities in their self-determination. And so we would, I think, just want to position it, and Nicole could explain it, in that the legislature made the law, the legislature is going to change the law, they need to have the courage to make a decision and say why. They are saying who gets the extra delay. And that I would be very supportive of.
Okay, so you wanted to change that one word. Did you get that done?
Well, I asked if you wanted to. I was significant versus substantial.
No, I think we'll plug in the same, let's plug in the same words that
We have
used.
someone with their
We'll
hand
set the
up.
words,
Okay.
the same words that we used in the previous.
So Linda Smith wrote this 10 minutes ago, that's why I wanted to say it. She says, but don't we have an executive committee that could guide Nicole if something happens between meetings? If something happens between meetings.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we
I just
do.
wanted to say that.
But when we have an issue that's coming up immediately and the board is meeting, the executive committee wants the whole board to weigh in on it. Even though this is like making sausage and it's taking a long time, we need to get there so that we're all clear and we're all on the same page.
Lori Childers wants you to read the motion.
Yeah, we will.
Really, Lori? Thanks.
I'm not gonna vote on my own motion until I hear Lori.
Talk about sausage.
We'll get there.
I think to the executive committee point, I think that we do our best, like you said, Clarence, but being more specific for Nicole in the interim so that even we aren't trying to interpret intentions and Nicole isn't having to look to us alone.
Yep.
Is timing wise important right now, I think.
Yeah, we don't wanna put ourselves too,
I don't want to recreate the last 2 weeks.
yeah, we also don't wanna speak on behalf of the board unless
Okay, let's work clear.
we have to.
So Sue's gonna read it.
We got it.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I can completely say, look, we don't think sending it back to communities is good for communities, it's good for all the school places involved. That's totally a simple question. I think that makes it easier for me to do my job.
Okay, we're gonna read the motion here so everybody online and everybody else can hear it.
The General Assembly should not take action on Act 46 deadline delay until the court has ruled on a stay. If this is taken up by the legislature, VSBA's position is that any changes to the law should not fundamentally change the rules, and any delay legislation should be clear and not create more chaos.
And
Okay.
we don't need extra words that like say should determine who or whomever. You
That work
know,
Yes,
Yeah.
because some new little
thing could
thing
happen.
could happen.
Could be.
And are we recording this?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so
what's
we've
it-
got the dialogue that
Yeah.
surrounded that whole thing, so when
Okay?
when we all.
Gio.
Look at my notes that are.
Now we're going to,
Gio, you're right.
this is almost as bad as trying to listen to the testimony on, the legislature says, we'll be out for 10 minutes while we talk about this. 20 minutes later on an open mic, you're getting ready to fall asleep, talking about everything except the bill. At least that was my experience in listening to that testimony.
Yes, there was a lot of downtime.
So, and they didn't shut the mic off. They didn't have a good tech like we have. Let's vote on this. Can we just do an aye vote? All those in favor? By saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Online, aye.
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 Linda?
Can you write in here?
Aye. Any here in the room? All the ayes? Those opposed? Anyone opposed, please? If not, the motion's carried, and I thank you all very much.
As do I.
Yeah.
All right, now that everything is destroyed, we took dinner. We have a few minutes left, and pick and choose what you need to do here.
Okay, so I will just say I do not feel like I need guidance on the other legislative issues. It was really an update. We just sent out a legislative report over the weekend. So there's a lot of detail in there that really, I think, hopefully catches you all up. The only other new development is the report on student staff ratios came out. So you all have a copy of that. The upshot is there's no recommendations coming out of it, but there's a lot of really interesting data in the report itself. So if you have any questions about it, or folks in your region have questions about the report or the process, please send them my way. I do think an ongoing issue that at least the House Education Committee has expressed interest in is really understanding what the heck's going on over at the Agency of Education. The statewide longitudinal data system rollout has created just a ripple effect of issues, and they're also losing key leaders within the agency. So I think at some point, maybe in March, depending on sort of where that conversation is at, I want to have a conversation about whether or not we're called for a delay of Act 173 implementation, because they still do not have a professional learning plan, which is supposed to be in effect for this current school year. 50% of the special ed department is vacant, and the stakes on this are high. So I think that to me would be a positive conversation to have in March. And we might want to invite some of the other organizations that have really worked on that legislation. I think we can defer action on the board committees. That's not a time-sensitive issue. We really should have everybody here. Does anybody have questions about the strategic plan monitoring report, or Susan?
I have one item hot off the press since we did this. Dartmouth contributed 485 pairs of socks to school board members. That's almost. It's about a 48% return relative to the number of school board members. Usually with a coupon, you're lucky to get 10.
Wow.
So they're feeling really good about it.
And lots of thank you
I'm
notes from
really
board
good.
members, and they sent us pictures of them wearing their socks in our emails and stuff. So.
Yeah, we've got a thank you, Susan, for really
Yeah.
making that
Yeah.
a reality.
Awesome.
It was,
Yeah.
And have we, presumably, we've thanked them separately, collectively, or whatever, so, thank
Yes,
you.
numerous times.
Yeah, and sent them copies of emails and cards and
Oh,
things that we
yes.
had gotten.
We sent them people's feed, we sent them all of the.
How much do socks go for each?
20.
Between $20 and $30.
It was extraordinarily generous gift, and we paid nothing for it.
It was more than we asked for.
It shows that school board members are penurious at best, right?
Our poor is a lot.
Well, same thing, isn't it, I guess?
I got my socks at the largest size. They weren't quite big enough, and I said, well, I'll give them to my wife. She said, I think they're too big. And my daughter comes along, she says, I'll take them. And she said, well, they're too big for you. She says, they're wool, I'll wash them. So I didn't get a second chance. I only had one vote. I asked one question and had a problem.
They're gone.
But they are very nice socks.
Can I ask, where are we on the going to local school board meetings?
So we are snowed out. I have attended 2 so far. I was in Rutland City about a month ago. I was at Montpelier the night of the ice storm, so I left early. I'm going back there. I was supposed to be in Williamstown last night. That got pushed off a month. So I have 2 to 3 scheduled per month from now through the end of the
How
school
was the
year.
one that you went to?
It was great. It was great. And you know, the topics that they were talking about, which is really a big piece of why I'm going, to make sure that our trainings are relevant for people, were pretty much aligned with what I would have expected them to be talking about in the finals. I actually was there in January, so they were still putting the final touches on budget stuff, and addressing issues that would be the kinds of things you'd expect mid-year in the schools.
Okay, the treasurer's report this month is the odd one, right? That there really is nothing for treasurer's report per se.
Well, this was an update
Yeah.
based on the questions that were raised last meeting.
Yes, so from last meeting, immediately after, Carrie realized collectively, we shared information that saw that net income was high because we're on an accrual basis, which means we billed out our dues and had not incurred all the expenses of the year. So even if had the dues not been received, that was showing up as net income for us. So that was clarified pretty quickly, but what we were unsure about was exactly how we roll over from one fiscal year to the next and how that plays out from income statement to balance sheet, income P&L to balance sheet. So we had a conference call with Sheila, our auditor / accountant, and she clarified for us, we had been holding a what was prior period adjustment item on our balance sheet that was really just a transaction that closed out net income or loss from the previous year and is on there just for the purposes of that transaction. Then it moves to unrestricted fund balance as either a plus or a minus. So we discovered now that that will happen instead of, Carrie used to do that at the end of the year. So in August, she would clear that out of our books. Now it clears out when it comes over. It comes over in a journal entry to become adjustment to prior period, and then immediately goes into unrestricted fund balance, which is much easier for us to be able to look at it that way. We know, in fact, what we're dealing with in unrestricted balance then. So we got that clarified with Sheila. If there were other questions, we also had some good input from Jim regarding notes. And I think every time Carrie and I and Nicole go through the financial statements and think about the notes, we're trying to get more and more clear. So if I have a question on it or you guys do, we'll try and implement those as sort of ongoing notes to the statements. So they could almost stand on their own. So we're working at that. And those who are interested in being part of those conversations from the last meeting, I hope will join us in the summer for the finance committee. And as any other questions come up for people, please, ask them when we're in conversation or forward them along to Carrie and myself and Nicole, and we'll continue to get those answers. We really want to make these as both transparent and clear as they can be. And sometimes when we've looked at them for a while, we're making assumptions about what other people see. So,
Okay.
Thank you for the questions, you guys.
All right, we don't have to take any action on that. The action we have is for the consent agenda. We have the 403B plan change that we have to adopt.
I move the consent agenda.
Second.
Including the
Yep, including that.
403B plan change.
Yes.
Okay,
Second.
seconded by Dan. Any discussion or questions? Not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried, so declare it. Did I put Linda aye, or is that an old aye?
That's
an
old aye. That's an old aye. All right.
She just died again.
Okay. New business. Anything we've skipped here will be on for next time. Any other pressing issues for the agenda for next month?
Lori's got her hand up.
What?
Lori has her hand up.
Oh, yes,
You're on.
Lori, go.
Thank you. So this isn't necessarily about agenda next time, but we ran into something at our school board meeting recently, and I wondered if folks would give me some feedback. We're getting, the statement was made that they are grieving everything. And I wondered if anyone is having that same experience recently, or if this is a common experience and has been for a while. I didn't know if that was something I could ask.
Well, certainly folks around the table can.
To be clear, this was so you've got
Could you kind of repeat that? Sorry.
So the union is grieving everything,
Okay.
and are other people experiencing that same dynamic?
Like, we've seen that cyclically. So you'll go through a stage where you have no grievances for a few years, and then all of a sudden, it's a certain group of people who grieve everything, and then it goes away again. So I suspect it's more personality related. At least that's what it always was with us.
We have a handful this year, which would be the first time in several years that we've had any.
I don't think we've been disproportionate. I will say, as we're back at negotiations, I believe, considering we're looking at a one-year contract, at least with our support staff, the list of things, because we had just come off unifying contracts, is longer than a one-year contract really warrants. So we are navigating those conversations to be prioritizing what should work its way into a one-year contract. And I do believe that by virtue of the fact we had two different, a school district and an SU, and we were unifying a contract 2 years ago. So there were things that, especially in the support staff contract, which was different, that were wins and losses at different times, and those things always come back. So here we are. I don't think it's about grievances so much, though.
I think I'm hearing in our area, there's a little bit more activity. There's, change is difficult for everybody, and we're still in some change mode, so we have to agree with everything. But we'll see how that works out.
You could ask, Lori, you could ask your superintendent to work with the Superintendent's Association. They'll often do surveys of their members to see what, whether that's something that's a common issue, and if so, how people are dealing with it, that sort of thing.
Okay.
That's usually a pretty quick way to get accurate information.
All right. If there's no other new business, someone like to make that motion?
So moved.
So moved by
Christina.
Christina and seconded by
Geo seconds.
Geo.
To adjourn.
This meeting be adjourned at 7:57.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you all.
Please
Thank
have
you, Nicole.
safe travels.
Thank you,
home.
yeah. I'm the writer, you know that.
I know, Christina.
Take care, Dan.
I don't white knuckle it too much.
So how'd your season end up turning out?
It was interesting. We met about 30,000.
Team's gonna be okay if I hightail it out of here.
Oh,
yeah.
So you gonna look at how much you spent? Yeah. How many hours you worked?
No, you don't, definitely don't. Expenditures,
She'll be
money
tired.
you took out of your pocket and gave to somebody else.
Yeah.
But we have more money for it, which is great because
She's, we started reading. I don't know if you ever had your kids.
for June 12th.
Oh, I have the full, I have the full set.
They're really
Two
good.
chapters left, book 3.
Yeah.
I got one.
I have the entire.
But that's.
So,
Actually,
let me know.
really good. They were with me for years. I would keep that way. So I don't think I have it.
I agree with you, like, I'm okay with that, but we just need to say what it is.
Last year, I hate this guy. He didn't have much.
And then the word choice.
Yeah.
I'm still paying, but I want to feel.
Yeah.
And I gave him.